Grace and peace to you. Happy Halloween and happy Reformation Day. We always commemorate Reformation Sunday on the last Sunday of October, but the actual day of the Reformation is October 31st, which is the day that Martin Luther is said to have nailed the 95 Theses to the door and thus sparked the Reformation of the church. And as I said in my sermon on Sunday, the Reformation is something that I think is a bit of a complex holiday or celebration or festival, because on the one hand, it does remember a time when the church had become corrupt in some ways and had strayed from its call of the gospel, and Martin Luther and many others boldly and bravely stood up to the powers of the time and said, no, this is not how God's love works, and this is not how the church should be functioning, and we're willing to risk a lot in order to try and reform the way the church was working. But that also led to fracturing of the church, and a fracturing that has only gotten worse and worse, a schism that has created multitude of divides in our world today. And so I think we need to hold both of these things together and to recognize that while there is good in the way that the church was in need of reform and people stood up and said that the reform needed to happen, there's also bad in the way that that reform meant a fracturing of the church and has led to such division in the church today. And so I think as we celebrate Reformation Sunday, the way that we can do it best is not to pump our chests and say, rah, rah, Lutherans, as though we're the ones who fixed everything and things are good now, because we also look at the church today and see that the church is still in need of further reformation. There are still things in the church, in the Lutheran church, in the church as a whole, that could be better, that could be more in line with how God moves and how God's grace works and how God's call works. And so rather than thinking of the Reformation as that time when the church became reformed and to celebrate that reforming act and how our legacy is tied to that, I think it's better to celebrate how the church is reforming and how we are a part of a lineage that is saying the church is always in need of reforming. And so rather than to focus on the Reformation that happened, maybe we should focus more on the Reformation that needs to happen. In what ways do we look at the church still and say, you know what, this is not how God would want things to be? In what ways are we still not being good stewards of God's gospel message as the church? And in what ways could we bring further reformation to the church in the same way that Martin Luther did, so that the church might better hold and claim and name and live God's message of grace in the world? And so that's what I want to be focusing on this Reformation Day, and I invite you to join me in praying about these things as well. Remember that you are loved, and God's peace be with you.